Oke, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone, my name is Avinur Nadifa Rizki, and on this occasion, I would like to perform a poetry entitled Whole Day. Whole Day. Mirror, mirror on the wall, among all the starters, who will stay among them all? Or will they all become strangers? Because when I'm a roller coaster, they were there and brought the light burned. Even when it's getting darker, will they meet me at the Saturn? Mirror, mirror on the wall, who will stab me on the back? Will they start to kick my ball, or will they send it to the back? 'Cause I got stain on my shirts, and I don't like how red it was. When I heal the wound that hurts, they just keep staring as it was. Mirror, mirror on the wall, were they? Are they? Will they? Why are you just hanging on the wall? I'm fine on my own, then you say. Thank you. All right, so now let's interpret the poetry itself and analyze it one by one. So it is basically a free poetry with 20 lines and 5 stanzas. And each stanza consists of 4 lines and has elegiac rhymes with A, B, A, B. Each line discussed about anxiety of a person towards people who she considers as something that is easy to come and easy to go. This poetry mostly uses metaphor, hyperbole, and personification image. There is pattern of repetition on whole day on each stanza, which refers to its own title. So let's analyze it from the title itself, whole day. Whole day in this poetry is actually a question from someone asking to a mirror, and they itself refers to people who keeps come and go in her life. So she keeps wondering what will happen to these people, either who will stay or who will left. So let's start to analyze the poetry from the first stanza. The first line says, mirror, mirror on the wall. Mirror in this poetry actually means the author who asks to herself, because mirror is a metaphor for self-reflection of its poet. So I choose to use mirror because mirror itself reflects a self-reflection of someone. So she actually asking herself about it. The second line says, among all the starters here is a metaphor of people who come to the poet's life. The third line says, who will stay among them all? This line is a question about who will stay in her life among these people who comes into the poet's life. Who will stay among all of these starters? The fourth line says, or will they all become strangers? This line is a question of the poet who adopting people around her and afraid that they will end up as strangers in her life later on. So basically, we know that from this first stanza, it actually questions about people who will stay, and the poet who keeps doubting, will they actually will stay in her life or will they left eventually? Now let's move on to the second stanza. In this stanza actually is about the more explanation of the first one about the people who will stay, and the poet keeps doubting it. The fifth line says, because when I'm in roller coaster in this line is a metaphor of ups and downs in the poet's life. She is trying to tell that her life has ups and downs. And then she said, they were there and brought the light burn. This light burn is a metaphor of warmth and comfort that some people offer to the poet. I choose to use the light burn because it will has a rhyme with the 8th line, which we will figure out later on. The 7th line says, even when it's getting darker, this line is a metaphor of the poet who keeps wondering, what if her life is getting worse? And then the 8th line says, will they meet me at the Saturn? The Saturn in this line is has the same rhyme with Lightburn. So that's why I use Lightburn and Saturn. So it has a good rhyme in it. Saturn in this line, it actually is a metaphor of a new and weird place and condition, because this line reflects a questions of a poet who is wondering that will her people still stay by her side even though it's getting worse, even though she's at her lowest and ended up in new and weird place and condition. Will they actually still standing there and offering that warmth and comfort to make her be okay? So that's what happened in the second stanza. The third stanza will actually consist about the poet who keeps wondering about people who will left her, because she can sense the way that yeah, people will come and will go. And for the third stanza will stands for people who will go. The main line always started with mirror, mirror on the wall. This line is a repetition of the first line, which reflects that the poet wants to ask another question to herself. And then the question is, who will stab me on my back? This line is a metaphor of the questions on how the poet wonders, will some people actually betray her? Will they start to kick my ball? This line is a metaphor of a question on how the poet wonders, will some people mislead her purpose of her life? So the ball itself reflects her purpose and her goals that the poets have. So the purpose and her goals, we could symbolize it as a ball. So will they actually kick it, or will they send it to the back? So send it to the back, so the it itself refers to the ball from the previous one. So it's basically a questions about how the poet wonders, will some people ruin the poet's life and then send it to the start again, so that the poet needs to restart her life once again due to these evil people? And for the first stanza, it actually has the same pattern with the previous one. So if the first stanza stands for the questions, and then the second one will explain more about the first stanza, it also happened with the fourth one. So the first stanza will explain more about the third stanza. The 13th line says, "'Cause I got a stain on my shirts." This stain on my shirts is a reflection of her trauma. So it's basically a metaphor of the trauma of the poets, who already got hurt from people who came into her life. And then she said, and I don't like how red it was. And red itself is a hyperbole towards the stain that I already mentioned in the previous line. So it means that the trauma is that worse. 15, it says, when I heal the wound that hurts. This line reflects that the poet wants to explain that she keeps trying to heal the trauma, they just keep staring as it was. And this line reflects how some people just watch her survive to heal her trauma and did nothing about it. They just staring at her as it was. And she was surviving all alone by herself. And for the fifth stanza, which is the last one, is actually an emphasized stanza of what happened eventually and the conclusion of the poetry itself. Of course, it starts again with the mirror, mirror on the wall, because the poet wants to ask another question once again to herself. And then the 18th line says, were they? Are they? Will they? This line is actually a hyperbole of the questions that keeps asked by the poet to herself. She keeps wondering, either in the past, present, and the future. All she thinks about is people around her and not herself. And then she's getting mad. She said, why are you just hanging on the wall? This line is a metaphor which reflects on how the poet mad at herself, because she cannot even answer her own questions. He just keeps repeating the questions, asking about people around her instead of asking about herself. And the last one says, I'm fine on my own, then you say. This line is a personification on how the mirror said to her that she is actually fine on her own. This line reflects on how the poet is actually fine all this time by her own, despite of what people did around her, despite of what the poet actually think about people. She's fine. The fact that she's fine on her own and she's just okay with it. So it's just a question. Those are just questions in her head that actually do not need to be answered because she's okay with it, with or without them. So yeah, thank you so much for watching this video. Hopefully it will be useful for you guys who would like to try to make a poetry. Thank you. See you later and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.